Hi YouTube, this is Amanda with Amanda Finds Freedom. I did change the name. I kind of saw that coming on the last video. I hope you all are doing awesome today. This is my first, I guess it's not quite my first video without Jack, but it feels pretty different. It's maybe my second video without Jack. And as you see, I am in a totally different location. If some of you who follow me on Instagram know, I am down in Florida right now with my mom. She actually had surgery today. One of my sisters is helping with that today, and then I'm going to be primary caregiver for the next 2 weeks or so while she recovers. So she is out of surgery and doing well. So thank you for everyone who has checked on me and asked about her today. And without further ado, let's get into the video. I wanted to talk about insulin resistance today. I've been discussing it with a few people, and there's, all kinds of different ways to do vegan. There's high carb, low carb, there's whole food, plant-based vegan, there's cooked vegan, raw vegan, there's higher protein and really heavy on the protein shakes, but still plant-based kind of vegan, and there's just a lot of different paths that you can take with it. And I really just wanted to touch on this one little corner and the science surrounding insulin resistance. So just so you know, right at the beginning, for the most part, the information that I'm going to be talking about in this video is information that I've gotten from Dr. Greger, either through his books, especially his recent book, How Not to Diet, or any of his awesome YouTube videos, which are totally free. And FYI, if you didn't know, all of the proceeds from his books do go to charity. So he's altogether just an amazing human. So insulin resistance. First of all, let's try and define a little bit of what it is. So insulin resistance happens when your body has trouble getting glucose from your bloodstream to your muscle cells. And so it sort of results in too much glucose floating around in your bloodstream without your body actually accessing it and utilizing it. And some of the early stages, that might even feel a little bit like fatigue for you because your body is having trouble accessing its preferred energy source in that state. So what might prevent the glucose from coming in through from your bloodstream into your muscle cells? That is something called intramicellular lipids. It's a mouthful, but that is essentially a coating of fat that sort of gums up the process of the glucose trying to get into your muscle cells. The fat, this is fat that perhaps is coating the outside of your muscle cells within your muscle tissue. And the way that insulin works is that your body you do need insulin. Your body needs insulin. Some people unfortunately don't produce it, and so that right there is a big issue. If you don't have insulin, it is sort of like the key. It is the knock at the door. It is the request for that glucose to enter your muscle cells. So without it, there's a whole series of enzyme reactions and other processes that can't happen without insulin first. So you have to have insulin to begin with. If you don't, that's a problem. But you can sort of develop diabetes if you become insulin resistant, in the sense that, okay, the insulin's there, it's knocking at the door, it's saying, please let me in, I have got some glucose for you, and nobody's answering. It prevents all of these other reactions from happening that let the glucose into your muscle cell, that let your muscle cell use it for energy, for fuel, for your workouts, for the things that you're doing in the day, for all of your NEAT, which is sort of your unintended exercise, unintended calorie burn that happens throughout the day. Whenever you're using your muscles, they need fuel. That's just how it is. Whether you're just carrying one of your kids, whether you're vacuuming, or whether you're actually actively, mindfully exercising, you're using muscles. Even just sitting here, there are some muscles that I'm using, although this is obviously not exercise. So without that, it causes a really big issue. And what seems to be a major cause of insulin resistance and sort of developing insulin resistance is a higher fat diet. And this is beyond just in the general sense of a higher fat diet, but in particular saturated fat found in animal products and in coconut. I believe that the research that I was looking at was done primarily on animal products. There's a lot of debate over coconut, but I personally, it's so easy to avoid. If I want to just have other types of fat, I can have avocado and be really happy. And it's not that I never have coconut either, it's just that I just don't have a lot of it. I don't base my diet around coconut oil, you know? So yeah, the science suggests that saturated fat, and especially high intakes of saturated fat, over time lead to buildup of insulin resistance. The science that I've looked at doesn't necessarily talk about maybe more of like a keto vegan diet or a keto raw vegan diet, which I have tried before and that was interesting. But I'm not so sure, depending on the person, at least I will say that didn't quite work well for me. I'm not sure that insulin resistance was really my issue in particular. It was some other issues. But it's up to you how you want to do this vegan thing. And at the core of the science is really just that, hey, too much saturated fat is not a good idea for your insulin levels, for developing diabetes and for insulin resistance. So I highly recommend reducing or cutting that out if you are someone who has family history of diabetes, if you have any amount of insulin resistance or risk of diabetes that you've developed yourself. That is probably one of the best things that you can do, one of the most immediate responses that you can do. There is a man, he goes by the name of Robbie. He has a course, I believe, or sort of a service called Mastering Diabetes. He has a lot of great information about diabetes because he was diabetic himself and recovered himself, and so it's an area of expertise for him. Obviously, Dr. Greger is a great resource if you just want to do research and don't need so much consulting. True North is definitely an institution that I would check out, depending on what your goals are, what your budget is, what your personality is. You know, you want to work with someone that you get along with, because otherwise you're just not going to listen to them. So that's really it for today. The main message is if you're concerned about diabetes, you need to cut out saturated fat. I personally do follow a higher carb raw vegan diet. I'm not a purist about being raw, and I'm also not a purist about the high carb thing. I do have days that have 20% or more fat, but they're just not common. And I find for myself anyways that it's been a bit more intuitive for me to have days where I allow more fat versus trying to have a very specific amount of fat every day to stay in a range that feels good for me. That said, I do have some amount of fat every day, whether it's almond milk or Brazil nuts, sort of like my basics, but I just don't make fatty meals, if that makes sense, even with the unsaturated fats that are found in plants. So that's been my path, that's been my preference. There is a lot of science that supports that, but in this case, really what I'm saying is cut out saturated fat if you're having any insulin resistance issues. Another sign of insulin resistance issues can be weight gain, so maybe it's something to consider if you're having trouble losing weight and you've already been vegan for a while or raw vegan for a while. It's just something to play around with. You can play around with your macros. Perhaps you're someone who's feeling really unsatisfied on the vegan diet and you would like to maybe experiment with increasing your protein. You can easily get enough protein on a vegan diet. Just add in some more greens, some more beans, especially some sprouts, any kind of legumes. All of those are really great sources of protein that aren't as high in fat as things like nuts and seeds are. And I also generally recommend against protein powders. There are some studies done that actually, so one of the other issues with animal protein is the increase in IGF-1 that your body produces, which promotes cancer growth. And there have been studies that show that soy protein isolate increases IGF-1 levels just the same way that animal protein does. So they, to my knowledge, haven't studied the other plant protein isolates, but in my opinion, I think that it's something where it makes sense to try to eat whole foods as much as possible, because once you isolate an ingredient, it's very easy to, for example, go over the threshold of what is safe for you to be ingesting, or it's just no longer built into nature's package of how your body digests and absorbs that, and your body self-regulates what it's going to take in based on what is going on inside of your body, what it needs at any given point. So by all means, consider increasing your protein if you are feeling unsatisfied. Another important element is to maybe don't have all of your protein in the one meal, add some sprouted legumes in multiple meals throughout the day, so you sort of spread it out and feel more balanced that way. But do it in a whole foods kind of way. Don't just go for the protein powders. They're highly refined, they're highly processed, and they actually also have very often other ingredients that then tie back into insulin resistance. So that will be another video, because I think I'm running out of time now. But there are mechanisms in how your tongue tastes different flavors and your body prepares itself for what it's about to eat. And when those signals of what your tongue is tasting and what your body is preparing for and what it's actually receiving aren't all matching up, it doesn't happen immediately, but if it's something that you're doing consistently over time, even with the natural options, including stevia, and this is in Dr. Greger's How Not to Diet book, it will over time cause issues with insulin resistance. So I will go into more detail with that in another video. But thank you so much for joining me today. I feel a little more nervous doing this without Jack, particularly. It was my first remotely sciencey video without Jack, and it's easier when he's just here interviewing me. And I feel like I know what questions someone might have to answer. So by all means, also please leave your questions below. I don't know what is helpful for you without some feedback. I don't know what questions you might have if you don't ask them. And I really, really want this to be a place where we can have open conversations. There's no judgment here. I am going to continue with Ask Amanda Anything, but it's just simply going to become a series instead of the name of my channel. And part of that process will be some posts over on Instagram to collect whatever questions people might have to then create videos and begin that series. So if you'd like to be a part of that, please come join us over on Instagram. It's a really fun, happy, accepting family so far. I feel like I've been in the sort of security bubble on the internet because all of Jack's followers have been so kind and so nice, and I just know that that's not the experience of the full internet when you're a content creator. But I digress. Anyways, thank you for joining us today. I am rambling now, but I hope you're all having a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.